Disruption in franchise development.
Yeah.
This is going to be probably my favorite thing in the entire world to talk about. Other than the Cubs, I like talking about the Cubs.
The Toronto Maple Leafs.
I'll talk about the Maple Leafs. I like the Maple Leafs. You're talking about this at IFA, at the convention, which there's information on the screen for all of you that don't know what the International Franchise Association's annual conference is. But why don't you give us an overview on what you're talking about, and then I think that's going to spark a friendly discussion about what's going on in the industry.
Right. So, we talk about disruption in the economy regularly in business, whether that's what Uber's doing, whether it's where machine learning is going, artificial intelligence, etc. And yet, I think it's valuable to ask ourselves, to what extent is disruption happening within franchising? Disruption happening within the way franchisors traditionally recruit franchisees. And I think that there's a lot of people looking in the rearview mirror and looking at the way things used to be and assuming that they are still the same. And so I'm leading a panel at the IFA with some thought leaders talking about, what's changing in the way leads are generated. What's changing in the sales process? And there's a lot of changes going on in both of those areas. Sure. For example, people don't buy the same way that they used to, right? So we all know that. We all know that we Google stuff. The general process is you'll Google a company, you'll read the reviews. In fact, statistically, 57% of the buyer's journey has happened before the person has spoken to a sales rep, before they've contacted the company. It's interesting when you talk to people in the franchise development world, you'll say, how have your franchise buyers changed over the last number of years? They go, oh, they've really changed a lot. Today we sell to very sophisticated people. Really, are the people different, or are they just much more informed? They don't recognize how much is going on the front end before they even speak to them. So when you speak to somebody, they know way more about you than you know about them. They've already searched your company, they've read your reviews, they've looked at your blog posts, they've looked at the sales reps or franchise development execs LinkedIn profile. And so they're so much more well-informed. And yet the old way of selling is the salesperson controls the sales process. They are the distributor of information. And there are still a lot of franchise development people who run their process that way today, where they think, I'm the gatekeeper, I am the conduit through which information flows. They don't realize people already have that information. In fact, the information they're really going to use to make the decision, you don't even have. It's talking to your other franchisees and all the other content they're finding out there. So the way we buy, we know that we buy differently today in the economy, but why don't we assume that also happens in the way people buy franchises? So how are we evolving as franchisors? A good example, some franchisors are shifting, that whole concept of our content online being behind kind of locked gates, where when you get to this stage in the process, we're going to unlock it and give you more information. Some franchisors are saying, you know what, you got it all. We're just putting it all online, and when you're ready, you call me, and then we'll take it. And finding their process moves much more smoothly. There's much more good faith associated with it. Is that the right way to do it? That's what our conversation at IFA is going to be about. We're going to just talk through this. What's changed, and how are we adapting to that?
How hard do you think it is for franchisors, and not just sales, it's the whole organization, to disrupt or change a model of what's been done in the past?
It's tough, and it's also that expression, you can't teach old dogs new tricks. There's a reason those kind of sayings stick around, because there's an element of truth to them. We find sometimes that it's easier to lean into disruption when you've got people that don't have the traditional stereotypes in their own mind. You might find that our number one franchise development executive who's just crushing it is a former franchisee. He has no franchise development experience, so he doesn't I was just speaking to one of our people the other day, new on the phones. He got in touch with all of his leads. And we kind of said, you got in touch with 100% of the leads you spoke to? And he said, yeah. Why do you ask? Well, because normally, if you got to 50% of them, that would be pretty good. And he was like scratching his head. He said, well, why wouldn't they respond to me? They went to our website, they filled out a form and asked to be contacted. So I just contacted them and I just kept calling them until I got them. So it's interesting. There's preconceived notions we bring into a sales process or into a development process that the more experienced we are, there's great things about that, and there's downsides to that as well. So I think businesses, if you want to lean into disruption, you also have to think, is my team prepared to change, right? And I think that's a cultural thing in a business.
Do expectations limit disruption in some scenarios? Say franchise fees. I could run through a full math exercise that shows if a brand eliminated their franchise fees until they got to 100, here's how much they would have to invest to protect that investment, but here's how much it would mean in royalty, where they would make significantly more money than having to fight through to get 10, 15, 20 people to pay this giant franchise fee. Franchise fees today with the brokers are skyrocketing, not because the brand's offering anything more to the franchisee, it's because the brand needs more monies to pay to the brokerage. All of this is built around higher expectations from top level traditionally that says, their brands will say, I want 40 deals this year. And you'll say, how many did you do last year? And he goes, 10. He goes, well, why do you want 40? I just want 40. No data supporting it. So can expectations, misaligned realities, not looking at franchise development from a global standpoint, understand that validation is franchise sales, even though a lot ignore it.
Totally.
Is that going to limit some of the disruption because supply demand from the top is somewhat overpowering in some situations?
Absolutely. First of all, I think that it's great if you can generate some positive cash flow on your franchise development, but I tell people that shouldn't be your business model. We look at a new franchisee as like planting a royalty tree. So if your franchise fee is a big constraint to planting royalty trees, how many royalty trees do you want to plant, right? If the franchise fee is a constraint, what can you do about that? I mean, with brokers, yeah, there's kind of a race to pay them more because people want to buy more market share and they want to get more focus from the broker. So essentially that's what we're buying with brokers. We're paying them and we're gaining market share. But by the time you pay the broker, the cost of training, if you're counting on having any profit from there, it's probably somewhat misguided. Again, it's nice, but if you can, but it's not a great strategy. So the question is, how do you, if you want to go from 10 to 40, how do you get there? I mean, one of our brands, Tutor Doctor, our target is over 100. We did 90 or 88 last year, and so there's some things we're obviously doing right, but I can tell you that it's not about generating profits from the franchise fees. In fact, we ran those same numbers you were just talking about, and we said, what could a model look like where we give away the franchise? And we actually came up with something we call the Young Entrepreneur Scholarship Program, the YES program, where we actually ran a campaign with our tutors and to basically give them a franchise, providing that they could demonstrate they had access to the operating capital. Our number one franchisee, who's got a multi-million-dollar business, he started in his mid-20s, he basically was given the franchise. The arrangement was from an existing franchisee. It was like a crop sharing model. He said, you can take this franchise, just give me a share of the double royalty, a royalty to the company, a royalty to me, and see what you can do with this thing. And from there, he just kept reinvesting, buying additional territories, and the reality, here's a guy who started with nothing. And so we spent a lot of time thinking about how can we go find those people that have the drive and the desire, maybe not the big franchise fee, and does that open up new opportunities for us to prospect elsewhere instead of fishing in the same pools that all the other franchisors are fishing in?
Yeah.
So we don't care if we have to give the franchise away under a model that makes sense there, because it's about planting royalty trees.
Comment and then a follow-up to that. So
yeah.
On the broker, I think brokers are fantastic because they've developed and cultivated relationships on local levels where a franchisor that's based in City X is not going to be able to touch. I see the value in it. What I think is going to be challenging, and the industry has to get to the point where someone says, screw it, I can't use the brokers in the current model, is when the franchise fee is going up, that's not more cost to the franchisor. I mean, that's less money that comes to the franchisor, but that's more cost to the franchisee. That I promise, $40,000, if the franchise fee was 20 last year, now it's 40, and franchisee X puts that, and that extra 20 that went towards the broker because they needed to pay for the deal, if that 20 went towards marketing their business, the royalty would have skyrocketed. That franchisee would have found more success. So we're almost as an industry cutting out the legs of some the new franchisees that are going to be one unit, maybe two, which are part of our ecosystems. We're cutting out their legs by making them pay more in this franchise fee. Follow up to what you're saying, I think it's smart. One, with going after millennials, you're finding a way to market to them and say, we want you in our system. They're going to be very powerful to franchising as we go forward. There's no doubt about it, and I don't know that enough brands are figuring out a way to talk with them. And you're already figuring that out. You're going to have a group of individuals that when Millennial X says, I want to become a franchisee, you're going to say, talk with these folks who have gone through it, your most successful franchisee, to say, look, all I needed was a chance. Someone give me a chance. I had the grit. So I think you're doing the right things to get there, because whether it's franchise fees, whether it's development, whether it's the way that we look at how can we impact the success of a franchisee, it's going to take some serious looking at for disruption to actually occur, because we can have these conversations as an industry of here's what we need to do, but until someone just says, you know what, screw it, I'm going to jump off the ledge, I'm going to do this for my brand because I understand that it will eventually go like this, then it's going to be hard to create disruption. A lot of these conversations at franchise conferences are great conversations, but the action is sometimes limited. Clearly, you're already doing it. You're saying the franchise fee is great, but maybe not. Maybe that hurdle is causing a gap in our growth opportunity.
Right. We believe that in many ways, especially if we take ourselves 5 years into the future, the franchising model is going to be turned on its head, where it's not. And what we're doing may become much more common in terms of how we're approaching that. The one thing, though, I think oftentimes, because I have the same respect for brokers that you do in terms of they perform a purpose. A lot of times people blame the increasing fees on brokers, and they don't understand that the unit economics of the broker's business has changed.
Yeah.
If you want to blame somebody, blame Google. Because what's happened is the cost of traffic, the cost of generating leads just continues to go up. For the last 10 years, there's been a dynamic that consistently over time, not just in franchising, but in almost every industry, the cost of leads goes up.
Sure.
And the quality of leads go down.
Yeah.
Why? Because Google's an auction and traffic is more scarce. So it's costing brokers a lot more to do deals than it ever has in the past. They're not sitting back getting rich. Most of them, they're struggling, to make the numbers work, and they need those dollars to buy those leads. So it's really, we're all fighting off that same pool. It's like we're all fishing in the exact same pond. We believe the opportunity is to find another pond and to fish in a different way.
That's it. I've heard stories about it, and speakers use it in different ways of talking about the gold miner who ends up in a mine and finds all the gold and then tells a friend, and then all of a sudden all these people are there, and now the value of what he found is no longer as valuable. But the same thing's true here. I mean, you take a broker system, there's new broker groups that are being created every day because they understand there's a lot of money to be made in franchising. Yes, the brokers' business model is getting more expensive, partly because there's more brokers, partly because more people fishing in the same pond. All of that is skyrocketing. It's ultimately going to be up to the franchisor to say, I really want to work with brokers. I understand that the value that they have. It gives us an extension on our sales team, people that are talking positively about our brand. But I can't play the game as much as everybody else of giving all of the monies to the broker. I need to save some for working capital for my franchisee.
The only way you can do that, though, is if you've found another pond.
That's it.
Because saying no to the brokers could mean saying no to growth. It could mean saying no to more royalty trees, right? So you've got to find another way to find those franchisees. The one other thing that I'll say, when we talk about thinking differently and that, turning franchise model on its head or the shift in the fulcrum, don't just think about your cost per deal, and don't just think about where am I getting franchisees from. Look at what the quality of those franchisees is. For us, doing an analysis on which channels are we generating our most successful franchisees from, because, and also which of my franchise development executives are bringing me the most successful franchisees. Because what you'll find is certain channels and certain development execs will sub-optimize and others will optimize. And you want to lean into the stuff that's working for you. And I think a lot of franchisors don't actually connect those dots and say, here's my most successful franchise, here's what that buyer's journey looked like for that most successful franchise, so I can go back and do more of that.
It's the value of staying focused. So the pond analogy is great. So if you know what area of the pond the fish that you want are, then you go fish in that area as much as humanly possible, and you put your best fishermen out there. I think part of the challenge with franchising currently is it used to be restaurant brands wanted guys with restaurant experience. Education franchise might have said, I want someone with education experience. So the experience had tremendous currency in the way that they were hunting for leads. Now it's whoever's financially capable. I'll convince them that senior care is right for them, even though maybe they were meant to be a burger franchisee. Because now we're selling because the expectations are so high. And it's hard on a salesperson, because at the end of the day, they got to feed their family too. So Are they really going to turn down wrong franchisees when they have all the pressure in the world to get sales? I think there's going to have to be a consolidation at some point of either best practices or the structure of the ponds that exist. There's going to have to be something that disrupts all of franchising. I thought in 2008 that was going to be the opportunity where the bad franchisors would disappear. But somehow a lot of them were able to hold on, because that's when the brokers started going like this. So they were able to make bad franchisors actually be good at lead generation. So there's going to have to be something that causes this disruption for us to really look at how this all behaves. I think sales in general has been taught as a widget, and unfortunately we're not selling cars here. This is not as simple as I picked out the blue one, this is the one I want. I mean, your life is going to change. You as a franchisee have disrupted everything, and I think we need to start looking at the emotional intelligence of how this buyer's behavior works, and maybe if we start there, some of the other disruption will be able to start filling into that place.
Yeah, totally agree.
The last thing that I'll say, I find it interesting on particularly the value of a deal. How much does it cost to get deals? How much are the cost of leads skyrocketing? I have a good friend. I said, how well did lead generation work for you last year? And he said, I did about $2 million in franchise fees. I said, okay, how much did you invest to get to that? He goes, I don't know, my all-in budget was $300,000. And then next week he goes, we need more deals, because the $2 million had already come up, and now he's only as good as his last deal. And I said, all right, I have a check for you for $2 million. How much are you willing to pay me to get that $2 million? He goes, I don't know, $1.9 million. I go, right. I think if we start looking at how much do we actually invest to get those franchisees, when it really is microscopic. To get the $2 million in franchise fees, you spend $300,000. We have to start looking at what is our true investment, so that we can go find those other ponds. Because just spending $300,000 a year to go get 100 franchisees is eventually not going to work anymore. We might have to say, let's pay $600, because we're still going to get $2 million back. We'll feel good about $2 million, and that return on investment for us is actually significant. But I think we're stuck in trying to make such a good deal out of it because we think we're selling cars.
So, I think there's a real lack of sophistication around KPIs in many franchise companies. One of the things I ask when I'm interviewing a VP of franchise development, I'll say, tell me what your most important metrics are. And when they tell me cost per lead, I'm like, that's like the worst metric. Because you probably want to spend more on your leads, but the question is, what is the quality of those leads, and how do you get the proper measure, right? The other thing is, when you start talking to people about what's your cost per deal, and they talk about a blended cost per deal. So they say, my cost per deal is $8,000. Well, that might include the referrals you got from your franchisees. It might include some people that Googled you and found you in your organic search. But if you can't scale your business on an $8,000 cost per sale, most likely, if your average is 8, because that 8 includes some that are 2 and some that are 15s. And so if you're going to try to scale your business and you're going to start leaning into PPC, or you're going to lean into programmatic display and top of the funnel kind of advertising, your cost per deal is going to go right through the roof. And the question is, do you really have the appetite for growth? Because if your business model is not such that you can be very successful on the royalty side of it by giving up most of your franchise fee, then I would suggest you pull back, work on the business model itself, the unit economics, before you start leaning into franchise growth. Because ultimately you're buying market share, and if you're not willing to raise that ante, it's like people that try to negotiate with a broker group. It's like, your broker fee is $20,000. We'll pay 18 or 17. That's a total false economy. What most sophisticated franchisors are saying is, your broker fee is $20,000. Can I pay you 22? Because they don't want to be the brand in the inventory that is underpaying, because they're not going to get lead flow, right? So there's a lot of counterintuitive things and false economies when you don't think clearly about your KPIs when it comes to lead gen.
There's a lot of chaos in development, clearly. But if you want to learn more about this or what Dan's talking about, obviously IFA Convention is a great resource for it, and we'll pop up your LinkedIn on the screen. But thanks for the conversation.
Thanks.